A world-renowned surgeon, a highly experienced pilot, and a twin-engine airplane that, on paper, should have been able to fly on just one engine. Yet within minutes of takeoff, everything went fatally wrong. And here's the twist. Investigators uncovered not just a mistake in the cockpit, but a hidden mechanical flaw buried deep inside both engines. A time bomb that had been waiting for more than 2 decades. Let's start with the flight itself. July 18th, 2023, Santa Fe, New Mexico. At about 9 in the morning, Dr. Randolph Randy Sherman taxied his Cessna T310R, registration November 5251, Charlie, onto runway 20. Weather? Clear skies, calm winds, ideal. But seconds after liftoff, his calm voice crackled over the radio. Engine failure. Controllers cleared him to land on any runway, but Sherman replied, At that point, the airplane had managed to climb only about 200 feet above the ground, and ADS-B data showed it was creeping along just above 100 knots. Witnesses saw the left propeller motionless, the right engine struggling to carry the load. Now here's the crazy part. Instead of holding level and easing back toward the airport, the airplane began a slow left turn. That put it toward an alley lined with houses. Just before impact, the left wing dropped, the nose pitched down, and the aircraft slammed into a home, bursting into flames. And this is where the story shifts, because on the surface, this looks like a pilot who lost an engine and then lost control. But that's only half the truth. What actually happened was the perfect storm. A hidden defect, the harsh performance limits of high-altitude airports, and yes, one crucial misjudgment. Before we dive into the mechanics, we need to understand who was at the controls. Dr. Randy Sherman wasn't just another weekend pilot. He was a 72-year-old surgeon from Los Angeles, internationally respected in reconstructive microsurgery, and a senior faculty member at Cedars-Sinai. Colleagues described him as brilliant, dedicated, and larger than life. But aviation was his other passion. Sherman had logged more than 5,000 flight hours. He was ATP rated, a multi-engine instructor, and he didn't just fly light twins, he also flew warbirds and helicopters. Friends said he had fantastic engine management skills, the kind of pilot you'd trust in a tough spot, and that's what makes this accident so striking. This wasn't a rookie making beginner mistakes, this was the kind of guy you'd expect to nail the emergency procedures. So, how could someone with that level of experience end up in a fatal crash less than 2 minutes after takeoff? The answer lies inside the engine. When investigators opened up the wreckage, what they found inside the left engine was shocking. The oil sump was full of metal fragments, broken pieces of counterweights, retaining rings, and connecting rods. It wasn't just a simple failure. This engine had literally torn itself apart. So what caused it? It turned out the crankshaft counterweight retaining rings, tiny but critical components, had been installed wrong. Not just a little wrong, but completely misoriented. Some were flipped, sharp edges facing the wrong direction, gaps misaligned. And here's the really crazy part. This mistake wasn't recent. It was traced back 25 years earlier when both engines were worked on to comply with a Continental Service Bulletin and an FAA airworthiness directive. In other words, this defect had been sitting quietly, waiting for decades. Even more chilling when they checked the right engine, the one that didn't fail, they found the exact same incorrect installation. It just hadn't given out yet. Imagine that, both engines carrying the same ticking time bomb, but only one exploding into disaster that day. And this highlights something every pilot and owner needs to understand: latent maintenance defects. You can fly for years with something installed just slightly wrong, and it won't show up until one day, at the worst possible moment, it finally does. That's the hidden danger of trusting that, if it hasn't failed yet, it must be fine. Here's the thing. On paper, the Cessna T310R should have been able to survive this. Even with one engine out at about 5,100 pounds, the book said it could still climb at roughly 300 feet per minute. That's not great, but it's enough to clear obstacles and limp back to the runway. So why didn't it? The answer comes down to the brutal reality of physics at Santa Fe. The airport sits over 6,300 feet above sea level. Add in the warm morning temperature, and the density altitude was pushing 8,700 feet. That means thinner air, weaker engines, and wings that don't produce quite as much lift. In other words, the margin between just enough and not enough was razor thin. Now, in this kind of emergency, there's one number that matters above all others. VYSE, the best single-engine rate of climb speed. In this airplane, it's 106 knots. Fly slower than that, and you're no longer climbing, you're sinking. The data shows Dr. Sherman was around 100 knots just below the line. 6 knots doesn't sound like much, but in this scenario, it was the one thing that separated controlled flight from disaster. And to make matters worse, it wasn't just a speed problem. The left engine had failed, and in conventional twins, the left is the critical engine, lose that one, and the aerodynamic penalties are harsher. The handbook calls for a slight 5-degree bank into the good engine, in this case, the right. But instead, Sherman was turning left into the dead engine. That choice spiked drag, killed whatever climb performance he had left, and sealed the airplane's fate. Instead of eking out a marginal climb, the airplane slowly bled off energy until the wings stalled and dropped. Now, before anyone rushes to judgment, let's talk about the human side. This was a textbook trap for even the most experienced pilot. Think about it. Seconds after takeoff, at maybe 200 feet, the engine fails. You've got no altitude to play with. You're trying to fly, process what's happening, and talk to the tower all at once. That's task saturation in its purest form. And then there's the startle effect, that adrenaline surge that clouds decision-making for those first critical moments. Sherman told the tower he wanted to get some altitude. That's a completely natural instinct. Altitude equals options. But here's the really frustrating part. In focusing on altitude, he let the airspeed slip. It's the classic tunnel vision problem. You can't chase both at once, and the one you ignore will bite you. And ironically, his deep experience may have been part of the problem. He wasn't a student drilled to recite, fly the airspeed, feather the prop, bank into the good engine. He was a seasoned aviator, confident enough to improvise. Don't get me wrong, his credentials were impeccable. But in this case, instinct and confidence lost out to procedure. And the procedure, the boring, rigid checklist drill, is what saves airplanes in engine-out scenarios. So what do we take away from this? First, maintenance. This crash reminds us that just because an airworthiness directive was signed off doesn't mean the work was perfect. Those counterweight rings were installed wrong 24 years earlier, and nobody caught it. That's extremely frustrating, but it's reality. Latent defects can sit hidden for decades. Aircraft owners need to dig deep into records and sometimes even re-verify old work because history matters. Second, performance awareness. Light twins aren't magic. People love to say, you've got 2 engines, you're safer. The truth? If you don't nail the speed, the bank, and the procedures, a light twin with 1 engine out can become more dangerous than a single-engine airplane, especially at high-density altitudes like Santa Fe. Third, training. Engine-out drills at safe altitude aren't just check-ride maneuvers. They're the only way to make the right response automatic when you don't have time to think. When the engine quits low to the ground, you don't get to debate options. Your body either reacts correctly or it doesn't. And finally, the human reminder. Dr. Sherman was a brilliant surgeon, a respected teacher, and a pilot with thousands of hours. Aviation didn't care. The sky doesn't respect resumes. It only respects discipline, training, and physics. That's what makes flying both so rewarding and so unforgiving. In the end, this crash came down to a deadly chain. A misinstalled part buried deep inside the engine decades ago, a critical engine-out scenario, and one slip in handling that turned a routine departure into tragedy. But here's the question for you. Do you think this crash was really caused more by the mechanic's mistake all those years earlier, or by the pilot's actions in those final 60 seconds? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dive crash analyses like this one, hit that subscribe button, because these stories always have lessons worth learning.